Howdy ho! Today working on a 2007 Wrangler, and we're doing an axle seal. I really don't like all those websites that, oh well, the axle, it supports the wheel and keeps your car on the road, and the seal, it keeps all the. I don't need all that baloney. Just get right to the point. So that's what I try to do. So get your caliper off with the bracket. Take the bolts off the bracket. Take your sensor off, your wheel sensor. Take it out of the tube back there. These 4 bolts that are on the inside here. The 4 nuts that go back here. Get those off. And then you do not need to take the pumpkin off. Let me tell you that much. I've seen videos where they, you gotta take the pumpkin off, cover off, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't. This is a Dana with a 410 gear. So get those 4 nuts off of there. They're 18s. I would start with a wrench first to break them. And then your ratchet. You don't need to take any of this off. Leave it there. This is the bearing seat. That's the new one. So we go over here to the axle. And all I did is, after I put the bearing and the race on the axle, that's when I took the race off and slowly worked it into the differential tube like you saw. Now in order to get that original bearing off, this is the original bearing. You just make a cut in it like that, because you want to go horizontal like that so that you don't cut up your plate, which is this here. You don't want to cut that up. So you go at an angle. That's your bearing seat. Also your spacer, lock ring. You just make a cut in it like that, and then take a chisel into that groove and hit it pretty hard. It cracks it. I don't know if you can see that crack or not. Yeah, that small crack that releases the pressure on the axle. So you take those 2 off. Take this one off. Once you've cracked it, that'll get your bearing off. Sometimes they come right off. Sometimes you have to cut them and break them. Your seal is down here. So when you go to put all this back together, this has to go first. Then your seal. Then your bearing. And then the ring. Now the bearing has to go a certain direction also. And if you're looking at the bearing, there's a difference in each side. So this side is kind of flat on each edge. Look at the other side of the bearing. It has this rounded area. That rounded area goes towards the studs. So it goes on just like that. And of course this would have all the bearings in it, everything, and the race and all that. Okay, so that flat part goes down like that when you're looking at the new bearing, whereas the rounded part edge goes towards the bottom. So to get that on, I've got 1 3/4 inch pipe. It's 1 3/4 inch. It's about 4 foot long. Get this on solid ground. My garage is carpeted, so I had to flip up the carpet. And under here is an old bearing race from another vehicle that this slides over top of. You can see that, because you don't want to be pounding. See how that goes in there to support that. That goes right inside that bearing seat so that you don't destroy your studs. See how we're up off the ground? All the pressure is going to be in the center, so you won't warp or bend your flange and pop your studs out. All right, so you got that. Then you take your 1 3/4 pipe, put it on there, and just keep blasting it like that, super hard. And that's why I got it 4 feet long. Just keep blasting it like that as hard as you can, keeping it as steady as you can until that you can hear that seat onto the bottom of the axle. And that's about it. Now, one thing I do want to say is I put the bearing race back into, this is the new race from the new bearing. Once I slam it onto the axle and it's all the way seated, then I come back over here and I take the new race off the new bearing and I work it into the tube. It just guarantees that race doesn't get cockeyed in the end of this tube and mess it up. Because now all you got to do is just be careful as you put it in and set it on that race. Put your bolts and nuts in these stud holes here, and make sure that your seal is lined up before you put too much pressure on the studs on the other side. Make sure your seal's lined up. Put your bolts on the back side by hand, the nuts on by hand, and tighten them up slowly so that you don't bend your seal or get your seal cocked in there the wrong way, because the seal goes from here to the race, from the outside edge to the race. So when you're going to put that axle in, you've got to center that seal in this area before you tighten it up. And that's why it's a good idea to put the race on first, because you're trying to put that, if you leave the race on the bearing, you're trying to do both. You're trying to put that race in there plus the seal, and it's very difficult. So if you put your race in there first, just gently tap it in. All I did was tap it at the top, tap it at the bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, very gently till it finally seated all the way down. So I'll put the axle back in, slowly work that seal back into its groove there and tighten her up. Be sure to use the torque specs for those nuts on the back side so you don't break them off. And also you get even pressure on the bearing so it'll last longer. So when it comes to putting it back in, I put a small amount of RTV gasket maker right here. I do 90 minute, just the strongest. And it only takes about 90 minutes to dry. Now what you want to do as you put this in is you want to keep this plate tight up against your seal. And then everything should go in real nice and easy. Because these ribs right here that are on the seal tend to wear out and then it starts leaking. That's another reason why I put the RTV, as well as it makes this seal easy to go in. Alright, so don't hit your race. Get it right through the center. Very carefully. Slide her in there. Remember, keep this plate up against your seal as you push it in. You have to pick up on that end a little bit for it to go into your carrier. It's not always easy to find, but I know it's in the center back there somewhere. So, there it is. And keep that plate. Okay, so I got her centered into the carrier. I'm pushing up against the plate so it holds that seal. Just wiggle it a little bit. There it is. Done deal. Tighten up the nuts on your plate on the back side. Be sure and torque them. Alright, so axle's back in. Torque the nuts on the back side of that plate. Got my caliper bracket back on there. Now also put you some anti-seize around here, especially if you got aluminum wheels, because of the galvanic corrosion. That way you can get your rim off and your rotor. Especially if you guys up north. All right, so right now I've got the axle at an angle so that the gear lube will, of course, go over to the opposite side. So now when I get the wheel back on, I'm going to jack it up on the driver's side and let that gear lube come towards this bearing that I just put in, so it fully lubes it before I go and drive it and all that. Another thing I'll do before that is I'll check the level in the differential, which is just a matter of getting that top plug out and make sure that the vehicle is level. I put a level on the bottom of the rocker panel when that's long enough. Just put your level on the bottom of the rocker panel there, get it as level as possible. Check and make sure that the gear lube is appropriate by filling it until it comes out of the hole. And it's crucial that you get the proper level, because too much, you'll make bubbles and you'll destroy your gears. Not enough, and of course you'll burn up your bearings. So check your application to make sure, because some of them on that plug you have to put it like a 1/4 of an inch below the where it flows out. So instead of it flowing out as soon as you take the plug out, you're supposed to be a 1/4 below that. But check your application, see what yours requires. Alrighty. Happy trails.